Welcome to today's event on culinary diplomacy at Perry Worldhouse, the University of Pennsylvania's hub for global engagement. My name is Michael Horowitz. I'm Richard Perry Professor and Director of Perry Worldhouse. I'll do my formal introduction in a moment, but before I begin, a few logistical notes. First, following the cooking demonstration, we will open the discussion up to questions we've received from the audience. Second, to ask a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom interface in the middle. Third, you will also see a chat button. Please save the chat area for any technical or other logistical issues, but if you can't see it, you can insert questions there as well. And we'll drop resources there during the event and at its close as well. This is pretty darn exciting. Today's guests are Ed Beetar, Amanda Freitag, and Marc Murphy in conversation with Lauren Bernstein, who created and runs the Culinary Diplomacy Project. If you could all turn on your cameras and microphones, let's begin. That's one.
Hello.
Yes. Hey, Lauren.
Am I on? No, I'm not. Where's my camera?
It's not letting me start my video.
Oh, okay. I'm on?
Hey, Marc.
We can see.
Hey, I did it. I did it.
Marc, you are a champion of our time. Hey, Ed.
How are you guys?
How are you?
Hey. So while we're waiting for everyone to come on, hi, Amanda. Amanda's here. Thank you so much, Mike and Perry Worldhouse, for having us here today. We're really excited for this program. If you guys are cooking along with us today, first of all, welcome to everyone who signed on and who's joining us. If you happen to be cooking with us today, what I'm going to ask you to do is go ahead and soak your bulgur, because your bulgur wheat has to soak for 30 minutes before you cook with it. So we're going to have you start doing that now. So we're going to chat for about 30 minutes. So by the time you get cooking, it'll be ready. And so what you're going to do is you're going to put your bulgur wheat in a bowl, and you're going to put about 1.5 cups of water, just room temperature water in that bowl. So there'll just be like a little bit of water over the top covering your wheat, and it'll absorb that water. So it'll be ready to use soon. Okay, so today, you know, we just had a lovely introduction, but just so you know, we've got Marc Murphy with us, who is from the Food Network show Chopped, as you all probably recognize, and Amanda Freitag also, who is from Chopped, joining us today. And we have Ed Beetar, who is the co-founder of Comma DC, which is an organization that he'll tell you about that works with refugees in the food space. And I am Lauren Bernstein, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Culinary Diplomacy Project. Our project is a nonprofit where we basically use food to teach people about different cultures and to use that food experience to sort of break down those barriers and allow people to communicate, learn about each other, and enjoy food together. And so we're going to be doing a little bit of that today. But before we get started, our conversation is about culinary diplomacy. So I just want to tell you what that is. And it's what our project is all about. So culinary diplomacy is defined as the use of food and cuisine as instruments to create cross-cultural understanding with the hopes of improving relationships and cooperation. And there are 3 different ways that you can engage in culinary diplomacy. One is government to government, and that's when one government, let's say, is hosting another government. It's a state dinner. They're using food as a diplomatic tool. Perhaps they're going to convene a small intimate dinner to discuss negotiations versus sitting in a boardroom. So government to government is when one government is using food as a diplomatic tool to engage another government. Government to foreign public is when a government uses food as sort of a soft power tool of diplomacy to encourage cultural exchange with the citizens of another country. So that's when a government is trying to engage another country citizenry and engage through food and culture in order to build a relationship. And then last is citizen to citizen, and that's really what we focus mostly on with the Culinary Diplomacy Project. And that's, you know, non-state actors engaging in cultural exchange intended to improve cross-cultural relationships. And so we're going to talk a little bit about all three of these different ways that you can engage through culinary diplomacy throughout our conversation. So I'm going to start with you, Marc. I'm going to kick us off with you. Marc, you were selected in September of 2015 to prepare the state lunch. Now, a state lunch, for those of you who don't know, when there's a state dinner at the White House, earlier that day, there's a state lunch at the State Department, U.S. Department of State. It's their highest level event that they do. They host the visiting leader, and it's the Secretary of State and the Vice President of the United States who hosts that world leader. So Marc, in September of 2015, you prepared the lunch for the visiting President of China, Xi Jinping. First, can you tell us why you were selected to do that lunch, to prepare that lunch?
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. So I was selected. First of all, I had just done a trip to China. I was there in China, I'd say maybe a couple months before, and I went to represent America, obviously as a culinary diplomat. And I got to go to a bunch of different cities. I was in Guangzhou, I was in Shanghai. I got to take a little side trip to Hong Kong. And I worked with the American Embassy and the American consulates, and I did a outdoor barbecue in Guangzhou, which the American government was hosting some of the Chinese dignitaries that came in for this meal. And it was a wonderful sort of exchange. There was also I got to meet some other Chinese chefs. I got to work with some of them. We went to some of their restaurants. And it was just sort of a great way to sort of open up everybody's, oh, sorry, can you guys hear me? Sorry, my phone seems to be, somebody's calling me. Sorry, you can hear me. Yeah, so what was great was that, you know, I got to work with these Chinese chefs, and it was really about us getting to know them and them getting to know us as chefs. It was chef to chef world. I mean, most chefs, as we always say when we travel, we don't really care about politics. We care about feeding people, and it's true every time I go on one of these trips. It's a beautiful thing to see that, and you know, sort of. And it also, there's moments on these trips where we get to sort of explain our culture and our culture through food. And that's always very fun. Actually, on that trip, I think I was actually also with the sort of in conjunction with the Department of Agriculture, we were talking about pecans and cranberries, which are one of those things that are very American, right? So it was one of those ingredients that I got to showcase and highlight and cook with, which was really kind of fun to be able to see that and also talk to Chinese chefs about that product and that ingredient. And you know, and that goes down to our culture. It was a lot of fun. Oh, so, I'm sorry, but the dinner. The lunch that I cooked. So I got a call from the government. It was actually from it was Secretary of State, I think, Kerry at the time, and I was amazed. First of all, they said, "Can you come and cook this lunch?" And I was like, "Well, of course. It sounds amazing." And as far as an experience goes, cooking one of these lunches. It was for 250 people. You think you're cooking for the heads of the state, whatever. You think it'd be maybe 20 people at the table. Everybody has the big entourage. You think the rock stars have big entourages. Government people, when they travel, have bigger entourages. But the most amazing thing, there was 250 people in the room at the State Department. And the most important table, obviously, were the most important people in the room. It was a table of about 20 people. We fed them and the whole entourage. And the president of China was, nobody came back and paid us a compliment, but everybody, the waiters that worked there, said the compliment was paid because the plates were clean, and that we won because they love the food. So that was great. And we also tried to use some of their ingredients sort of an American way. I think I did a short rib, and I used some Szechuan pepper in the short rib marinade to sort of tie, you know, how we can work together with food between countries as well.
Well, so, you know, when you are putting a lunch like that together, and you have to put America on the plate because you're hosting another country. Obviously, you're not going to cook their food for them, but you want to showcase American food, but you also want to incorporate something from that visiting culture to show that you're respecting their food and their cuisine, and maybe it's a technique or an ingredients. So when you were planning that lunch, like what went into that planning for you? How were you thinking?
Well, for me, I was using a very, very American product, and I was using American beef, and I was using all sorts of things like that. But yes, I did a little nod or a tip of the hat using Szechuan peppercorns, and a dessert. I think I went super American, and I did a butterscotch. I think I did a butterscotch pudding with a pretzel crumble, which was sort of something that most people don't obviously see in China. But it was, I mean, the planning was really. There's a couple of things. First of all, as a chef, it's about executing the meal. And when somebody says you got 250 people, you're not, searing skirt steaks and slicing them for 250 people. So I did a braised short rib. That, to me, as a chef, is the first order of business. And then they tell you the timing. They literally said they have 25 minutes for a 3-course meal. And I'm going, okay, some of this stuff already has to be on a plate. I don't even remember it was the appetizer, but I'm sure it was plated and ready to go when they sat down already on the table. Those are just kind of things you have to think about.
It was roasted corn and chili crab soup. You used Maryland crab, sweet Jersey corn, coconut milk, and avocado. It was delicious.
And that was, as you can see, it was a cold soup, which made my life a lot easier because I didn't have to worry about it being hot or being, it could already be served when they sat down. And then as soon as they clear, the short rib can land. And then as they're leaving, they're basically taking bites of desserts as they're walking out the door. Because these heads of state, when they come to visit, obviously our government, the schedule is packed.
Right. So basically you were showcasing American ingredients, but you were incorporating like the Szechuan peppercorn and the coconut milk just to give that sort of respect to the visiting country. Why do you think this meal matters? Like, why do you think that it's important when you have, especially a country that maybe we don't have, the United States doesn't have a strong relationship with necessarily, or there are tensions. Why do you think the meal matters? Do you think it's important?
I mean, to me, you just go back to, normal people at home. If you invite your neighbor over and have a meal with them, it's about sharing a meal, and it's about opening up your door, having them sit down at your dinner table or your kitchen counter and having a meal and having a conversation and having respect for each other. I think that is the basic part of it right there. And that is like, that's the beginning and the end for me as a chef. It's like we're inviting somebody from another country who might not understand our culture and our way of life. What better way to show them that than show them how we eat? I mean, that's pretty much what we do sometimes with these things with the government and culinary diplomacy and everything. It's super basic. It's just basic. It's like human instinct, really, of just opening up your door and breaking bread with somebody, and that's how you start a conversation. And I think, I think people get along a lot better when they're not hungry.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. And I just want to chime in and say that. Especially if you don't speak the same language. When you sit down at a table and you share food, you don't have to speak the same language. You communicate through the food, and I've seen that multiple times, and it always warms my heart, and then reinforces me that we're doing the right thing, by sitting down at that table together and sharing our experiences through food.
Can I add something over that?
Yes.
So I came from a country that is suffering from civil war, where people almost arguing and fighting over everything, politics, flags, all kinds of things you can imagine. But yet they all gather together on food. They all have the same value regarding food. If you mention the same dish, people will, from all the parties, from all the spectrum of the conflict, they will have the same opinion, the same ideas, the same thoughts about the food, which is something amazing. Food, I think it's the only component in my country, what's going on now, the only component that actually bring people together.
And just so everyone knows, Ed, you're from Syria. Just so, I don't know if that was, it was in the bios, but I don't know if that was mentioned earlier. So that's amazing that food, especially in a place that is struggling that way, that food is something that connects everyone. And I know food is such a huge part of Syrian culture, and there's so much pride behind your food, which is, and it's delicious, which is why we're cooking it today, and we're excited to be trying it. Marc, I just wanted to point out, just so our viewers know, so the trip that you went on to China, so that state launch is a really good example of that government to government engagement. And that trip to China is a good example of that government to foreign public engagement, because you went on behalf of the State Department, you engaged with the US Embassy, and your goal there was to engage the public, the public of China, the Chinese citizens, through food, and to engage them through the food experience. And I just wanted to back up quickly and ask you, why do you think it's more impactful to engage a population through food versus like, if you send out a pamphlet to talk about America? Why is it better to try to do that through food?
I mean, obviously food is what I love and what I do. And so that's where I start from. But I can give you a really, really good example of a food trip that I took when I went to Turkey. And this was a long time ago, and things were starting to change in Turkey. And as we all know, things are changing all the time, and in Turkey as well right now. But, I did a show with basically their big star, their food star on their television station. Unfortunately, I don't remember his name, but he was like he was like the Bobby Flay of Turkey, right? And I went on his show, and we both cooked a dish with eggplant. He did this thing called the Imam Bialy, which was the sleeping imam, because it was something after the imam eats it, he gets so tired because it's so good. And I made a tartine with an eggplant tartine, right? So I made something with eggplant, and I wore my chef's jacket, being an American chef, and there was a translator, and I was sitting there with the Turkish chef. And what happened is when I finished doing the show, they said to me, we couldn't have reached the amount of people that you reached with goodwill and through beautiful food, because a lot of people are watching television at home who might, in that country, some of them don't go out that much, or there's not as much communication with the rest of they don't know what America's about. But all of a sudden they see an American chef cooking arm in arm with a brother of theirs who they respect as a chef, and getting along and saying, wow, look, they can get along. These chefs can get along. Well, maybe everybody should get along. And you know what? The thing that tied us together, we didn't speak the same language, as Amanda was just pointing out, but we spoke food, and that's what really counted, and that's what mattered. And we had a relationship through food, not even speaking the same language, and obviously getting along. And I think, diplomacy is all about trying to get everybody to understand each other a little bit better. And as I keep saying, and this is why I work with you, Lauren, is because, it's the right thing to do, work through food and do it.
Right. So Amanda, you and Marc were 2 of 5 chefs that traveled with the Culinary Diplomacy Project to Jordan last fall. Can't believe it was already last fall. And we traveled around the country of Jordan, and we cooked in the homes of Jordanians to learn their food. And we also cooked with Syrian refugees that were living in Jordan. We visited Zaatari Syrian refugee camp in Jordan, and we also cooked with some people living in the Syrian refugee community in Irbid, which is a city that is 12 miles from the Syrian border in Jordan. So, on our trip, we went in, as I said, we went into the homes and cooked with the Jordanians. What did you learn about the people and their culture of Jordan when we did that? What were you able to learn from that experience about the people who live in Jordan?
So many things. I mean, obviously when we cooked in Irbid, it was a little bit different because we were in a beautiful home with a family that was established there and had been there for a while. And the feast that was made was unreal, and that was not uncommon. Everywhere we went in Jordan, we had a feast on the table. And I remember even after the first night, I remember turning to Marc and saying, I'm not going to be able to eat this much every night, but we as chefs, the clean plate thing is, we look at the plates when they come back to the kitchen. You don't want to send back an empty plate because that's an insult. But to them, that's just the hospitality. And so when we went to Irbid, we sat at the table with, there must have been at least 15 dishes of food, if not more. And we told stories. We talked about our experience, and then we talked a lot about their experience. And in particular, it really stuck with me, one woman who crossed the border with her children and her story. And honestly, I don't think anybody at the table didn't have a tear in their eye. And I think the most grateful thing that I felt at that moment was to be able to just hear her story, first of all, share that she shared it with us, that she felt open enough to share it with us. And we did it over this meal that we had together. You know, we were all eating together and we were happy, and we didn't know anything about each other or how we all got to that table. And when she told us her story, we realized even how much more valuable it was to be sitting there having that food. Yes, we want to eat delicious food. Yes, we had fun cooking. You know, we were cooking everything in the kitchen of the house. We brought it all outside. Marc was grilling with one of the kids. You know, the experience that we had will stick with us forever, but I also think the experience that they had with us will stick with them as well. I mean, I didn't want to leave that night. And that was at a home, and that was a huge gathering. But, you know, what we experienced in the refugee camp was something completely different, but with a similar vibe of that extreme generosity and hospitality, you know. And of course, in the camp, they don't have a lot to work with. And their markets are small and limited as to what they can buy. And, you know, I was amazed at what our host could do in her kitchen, her teeny tiny little kitchen with a burner like this one that I have, and a small little sink, and the meals that she could put out from there. Nothing about her situation affected her. She just kept doing what she does naturally, and make food for people and feasts for people and bring it all to the table. And we gathered and had an amazing lunch. And, you know, just the joy from that was eminent and obvious. And the kids were also just a big part of that experience. The kids that wanted to be involved, they were fascinated by us. They wanted to be hands-on, and the joy that exuded from them, you know, that's where they live, and that's all they know. And so to step into a very difficult situation for where these people are living, but then feel like it's absolutely normal, and this is the hospitality, they're just having a guest in their home. So honestly, all throughout Jordan, the warm welcome. We would meet strangers that would say, hey, can you come for lunch tomorrow? Can you come to my house for dinner tonight? You know, we were like, we have a very hectic schedule, but we'd love to, you know? So that was the part that was almost a little jarring for me, especially as a New Yorker. I was like, wait a minute, do I know you? You're a stranger, you're asking me into your home. But I feel like we got that consistently throughout our travels.
When we went to Zaatari, the refugee camp, we started the day with, we were sort of in a large room, and we all sat in a big circle, and it was us from our group and some refugee families and folks who worked with UNHCR, the UN organization that runs the camp. And we had interpreters, and we were talking, and we were getting information about what happens at the camp, how the daily life, and we were talking to people. But then, as you said, you know, we went to the markets, and we went back to the homes with the folks there. Even though we had that chance to talk in the beginning and sit around in that room, how do you think our experience was like? If we had just left after that and not cooked with them, how do you think that experience would have been different? Like, do you think that you got to know the family that you cooked with better? You know, we shared the meal after. Did you feel a stronger connection having cooked with them and been in their home? Like, what was the difference of those two experiences?
I absolutely felt a stronger connection. And I think, you know, it was a rare experience for us and for them to be invited into their homes in the camp. So we were obviously all a little bit nervous. I know I was, I know they were. I don't think anybody knew what to expect or what we were doing. So of course you go around the room and a bunch of strangers that don't speak the same language, and you introduce yourselves, and, you know, everybody's got their guard up a little bit. But then when you broke off into your groups and you went shopping, you had a goal, right? What are we going to make? What are we going to cook? What are we going to buy? And they were taking us into their territory. So then, you know, we were truly the guests the whole time. And then when we went into our host home, then we really got to know them through the cooking, through the stories, you know, through their kids and their family. And everybody, their personalities came out a little bit more. You know, everybody had their own personality, and everybody was so excited to show us. I think also really surprised that we wanted to know everything, just not only about their food, but their daily life and how it all works. And, you know, just to even see the open air markets and what they had access to. And that's a lot to open up to. And then without cooking together, without being invited into their kitchen, I do not think we would have had the same experience. Because then, you know, as Marc and I went into one home, Duff went into another, Mary Sue, Art, they all went into different homes. And then we all came together at the end and had lunch, you know, with our hosts, with our other chef friends that we had been traveling with. And I think we all just couldn't wait to see what was made. And we couldn't wait to talk about like what we just saw, because I had never seen anything like that before, you know, and I think we were all changed from that experience, but it would not have been the same just sitting in that open forum, very cold, you know, just kind of nervous about why are we all here. And as soon as you started cooking, that all faded away.
Yeah, Marc, you also were on that trip. You were there, and I do have to point out that so Marc and Amanda were in the same home cooking together, and they were making kibbeh, and they made because there was, you know, we all came together to share the meal after, so they had to make quite a lot of kibbeh. And you know what I think is very interesting, and we'll talk about this more with Ed also, is that, you know, when we were talking about making the recipe for this event, it was different because the kibbeh that they made, the kibbeh that they made in Zachary did not have meat in the outer layer, and that's because it's more expensive. And so I think what's very interesting is that the kibbeh that you guys made was an adaptation given the circumstances that they were living in, but it still allowed the people living there to hold on to their culture and to continue their traditions, but they just had to modify it a little bit to fit, you know, their circumstance.
Yeah,
you know,
and I also think that Marc and I were the last household to bring our food to the table because we had so much kibbeh to make, we couldn't make it fast enough.
and we're not experts yet. Let's put it that way. We're not quite experts, but we definitely got better as the day went on.
Yeah, I'm excited to get my hands on it again.
Exactly. I thought that experience, just to quickly chime in, you know, the one thing I saw, and yes, I mean, obviously we were sitting in a classroom setting, listening to what they did. There's a little bit like show and tell, not very interesting. It was interesting, but not that interesting. Of course, we wanted to get in the kitchen. We got into their homes. We got to meet their families. We got to meet their beautiful children. And the one thing I got from this was we're going into a refugee camp with 90,000 people. And I don't remember how big it is, but the actual square footage, but everybody's living in these very small areas and everybody's making do with what they can. They're making their little areas a little bit prettier with a little bit of a curtain here or a little bit of lace here or something like that. But the one thing that really got me was, you know what, children are happy. They're just happy people, creatures of this world, that even though they're living in this condition, they don't know anything else. The joy in their faces, the smiles in there, and it was so warming and it was so beautiful that these kids still had hope and they still had all this beauty inside them. And they were in a terrible sort of conditions of where they are, where the world is, and because of being, you know, chased out of a country, a war-torn country. But these kids laughing, having a great time. And
uh-oh, I think we just lost your sound, Marc.
We lost your sound.
right now at the end,
Oh, there you go. Yep, you're there.
I'm right here.
We
Did
got
you
you
hear all
back.
that?
Yes.
Did you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, okay.
Yep, we
Go
got
on to the next question. I'll sound better.
No.
I'll put my
No,
other
that's great.
ear. Hold on.
And I do, you know, we did go into the homes of Jordanians as well. We didn't just cook with the Syrians living there. We did cook with Jordanians, and we were in this wonderful city called Aqaba by the water, because the cuisine is different. One of the things when you travel to another country that's so important is, you know, just like the United States is very regional in its cuisine, every country is too. And so you learn different things about different regions when you travel through that food experience. And so we did travel to a place called Aqaba that's on the water that cooked with more seafood. And we did go into people's homes there to cook with them. And I know, Amanda, you made the sayadiyya, which was absolutely delicious.
I know, and I want to make it again.
Just tell them quickly what that was, because it was so delicious.
I mean, the sayadilla was this, these beautiful pieces of fish that had this amazing spice blend that we mixed with this rice that had these caramelized onions, and then we made this beautiful fresh salad. I mean, the process was kind of lengthy, but in the end, it was quite simple to make. But obviously, the spice blend that she used was her blend. It was nothing we could buy at the store. We tried to put it together at the spice market, and we brought our own spices, and she said, this is my spice blend for my sayadilla, and of course it was already blended, so I couldn't analyze it. So I can probably never recreate that flavor again, but it was just such a unique flavor, and it was such an interesting technique to how she made everything, and just being in that multi-level house with her different family members living in different parts, and, you know, cooking in her kitchen, and then, you know, Marc cooking downstairs, and Duff making dessert out on the terrace with grandma. Like, that experience was unreal.
And there was very little like actual speaking, right? I mean, because the language barrier. So all of that communication really was through.
Yeah, I mean, our translator was there in and out. But again, you know, it was just pointing, cut this, pointing, add that. You know, I was with Mary Sue Milliken, and we were both really eager. So we translated through that, you know, the technique of cooking. You know, we knew what to do. There was a pot on the stove. Okay, that's where the rice goes. There's a pan. That's where the fish is going to go in. You know, so you can communicate just through that alone.
Sorry, I just want to make sure we're not having a technical problem. I think we're good still. So just sort of last sort of question on this, just for you and Marc. Taking a trip like that where you're traveling around and you're having those experiences with the people who live there, how would you say that that is different? Do you learn more about a country versus, you know, going as a tourist and maybe seeing all the really impressive sights and going to all the great restaurants? Do you think you get anything different out of it when you're actually engaging and sort of cooking with people? And if so, like what do you think you're learning that you wouldn't otherwise learn?
I mean,
you can go ahead, Marc. I mean, I think we're going to say the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you don't just get to see the cover of the book. You get to look inside it. You're really, you know, it's like you get to see and meet people, meet their souls, meet their personalities. You know, there's no, you know, the difference is absolutely huge. Yeah, no, if you're just going and looking around and not talking to anybody, but then once you get in there and you start talking to people and everything, it's a whole different game. You just get to really a deeper dive, let's say.
Yeah, and most of the time when we were cooking, we were in somebody's home. How many times have you had a stranger from another country in your home, in your kitchen, cooking with you? Let me ask you that. Think about it.
Right.
Multiple strangers. So, I mean, it's game changing to have that hospitality. We're in the hospitality industry. It's very rare that we do something like that. So there's a real exchange of what life is like behind that closed door, that you just might be walking down a beautiful street and you see a house, but you don't know what's going on in the kitchen. You can maybe smell it, you could eat it at the restaurant, but there's a whole different experience when you cook together. And even so, after working in the kitchens with those families, when we did go to a restaurant the next time, I think we related to the food even better. Like this traditional dish, we had it in their home, okay, and then we had it in a restaurant and it was done a little bit differently. Just like any traditional dish that we have, you know, spaghetti and meatballs, right? or fettuccine carbonara. You're gonna have that in a restaurant, but if you go to Marc's house and he makes you carbonara, that's the best carbonara you're ever gonna have. So it's very different.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue, Ed, to you, because you know what you do is you invite people into your home to cook Syrian food for them, and you do these traditional dishes that your mom taught you to teach your friends about Syrian food. So tell us a little bit about that and why you invite people into your home for that. What are you trying to tell them about who you are and where you come from?
Actually, I didn't try tell them anything. I was just bragging how good I am in cooking, and people were like, okay, show us, show us. And after like 1 year, I decided that I'm good enough to have them, and nobody died yet. I'm checking on them. Okay, I'm joking. So the thing is, so as we came from civil war, people know nothing about my country. So Syria has like a great history and so like 7,000 years of civilization. We were on the Silk Road, the famous Silk Road back in the days. So we have this rich and very deep and full of components cuisine, where we have different kind of things. Our food is likable by all nations because we were like on the crossroads of, we had the Greek Empire, we have the Roman Empire, the Ottoman, the Armenian, the Kurd Empire, the Arab Empire. So all those empires, they came there, they settled down, and that make the cuisine change over the years to become one of the best cuisine that actually can make everyone like it. So when I came here, to be honest, I never touched anything back in Syria. My mom was like a professional chef. She more specialized in sweets, but she was very good in cooking homemade meal. So every weekend she spent like 6 hours, 8 hours in the kitchen, trying to cook like a couple of meals for the week. And actually, like when I was cooking, I felt something missing because I'm used to voice of my mom shouting of something I've done, something I haven't done, something I should be doing, but I have no idea what it is. So we never done anything. My brother and I, my sisters were too young. So we never done anything. We were like egg and potato fries was the maximum level we ever done. And then I came here and realized no Syrian restaurants, no one would cook for me. And I gained like a lot of weight, like 65 pounds of eating fast and junk food. No, I lost them all, which is like another inspiring story. So I decided to learn cooking. And luckily, I think my mom's DNA was in me. So I start like getting her kind of like recipes and asking her about doing stuff. And it was exhausting at the beginning because it was like, okay, like one punch of this, one sprinkle of that, and without any real measurement. And you have to fry it until it's become blonde. Mom, it's a green luchia. How you can make it blonde? I couldn't even understand that. But after like a lot of trial and error, and I start cooking and I start realizing that it is very delicious. And then I start like, on a shy step, inviting one friend and another to see like if it is my own opinion or like they are very good. And now I host pre-pandemic, before Corona, of course. I started having like 10 people or like 15 people in one event where I cook like literally half a dozen or like 8 or 9 different types of meal between a starter and main course and salads. And people love it. And I know they love it when they start asking, when is your next event? Because I might think, okay, maybe they might be polite. They just said, okay, we love this experience. We love the different kind of cuisine or different kind of dishes. But when they ask you and they name specific dishes, you feel like, oh yeah, this is what they love it. And now I do that out of passion. And it's one of the things that show my civilization away from politics, away from the war, away from the tragedy and drama. And to show that we are people, we had bad luck, we had bad people from all parts trying to prove some points. But the rest of us, the normal citizen who has nothing to do with that, we have this culture and heritage. And I think cooking is one of the amazing things. And as Marc and Amanda said, it's one of the most important introductories to everyone's culture and life. And when you invite people to your kitchen and see how you prepare that on real, it's amazing experience.
Well, so Ed, you came to the U.S. not as a refugee. You came through a fellowship program, but when you did come here, you started to do a lot of advocacy work for the refugee community, and you started you co-founded Comma DC, and I'd like to know a little bit about what Comma DC is and why you wanted to be a part of that, why you thought it was necessary to create this program.
For me, I might be blessed. I was born and bilingual. My family were both English literature grads, so they believe that having another language is a very good asset. So they put us in private school. So we were like my entire like academic year until I graduated, it was bilingual, fully bilingual. So I speak English fluently. I'm familiar with the community here, and I use the same like terms and slangs and idioms. So when I came here, I realized there is a huge gap between what the people here knows about the war and what actually going on there. And also some people were using the Syrian war for political agenda. So we were hearing a lot of stuff on television about that all males between 18 and 14 are potential like ISIS fighters, or all the refugees there are coming here to try to take advantage of the system and trying to rob the economy and trying to just take money without contribution. So this has inspired me to try to do something. And back in the days, I met a guy and he was inspiring to try to do something about refugee. And then we formed each other, and one thing led to another, and we formed Kama. So the basic of the concept of Kama is very simple. You are a refugee or asylee or someone who came to the United States from another country. You have skills. Maybe you are not using them now because you are trying to build your new life, but you have a skill. You might have passion in cooking, passion in photography, calligraphy, artwork, storytelling. You have some sort of skill. So as people, as us, as Kama, we are trying to let that person do a cooking class or art class or this kind of classes. So we prepare everything, the advertisement, the audience, all kinds of things, and just that person all have to do, or all she has to do, go on platform, or now on Zoom as everyone is doing, and perform that art or that skill. And it can enlighten their day, especially when they feel like they are struggling. They feel like, oh, we are needed, we are appreciated. And the American also see beyond the two-dimension image of, oh, refugee coming here, oh, how bad, how suffer. No, we have rich history back in the days, we have rich life, and we want to pursue and we want to come here and have our life again.
Well, I know that Kama DC has a cooking element to it, and I know that you don't typically teach those classes, but we are going to drag you into your kitchen there and ask you to teach us how to make kibbeh. Now, again, this is Syrian kibbeh, and it's traditional, and it's a little bit different, as I mentioned, than what Marc and Amanda made before. So we're all really excited to learn your traditional way of preparing it. So everyone at home, if you're going to cook along with us, get your stuff together. We're going to start cooking, and Ed is going to guide us in how to prepare this, and Marc and Amanda are going to follow along. Amanda's going to be using a food processor. For those of you at home who are using a food processor, Ed is going to be using a meat grinder. And just before we get started with the cooking, I will just point out and let you guys know that after this program, we're going to do a little bit of a social media competition. We would love to, we're sharing Syrian culture with you today, and we would love to learn about everyone's cultures. And so we encourage everybody after this to, in the next 10 days, to cook a dish that represents your culture, your personal culture. Snap a picture of it for us, post it on social media, and explain to us a little bit about why that dish represents your culture. We want you to, of course, tag us at Culinary Diplomacy Project on Instagram. So tag us at Culinary Diplomacy Project. Use the hashtag PWH for Perry World House. So it's PWH Cooks, and we'll have that information, I think, available after this as well. But we'll pick 2 winners, and each person will get a signed cookbook from our 2 chefs over here, Marc and Amanda. One day maybe Ed will have a cookbook, but he doesn't have one yet. So these 2 folks will get you guys a cookbook. But we just, we want this opportunity we want to keep learning about other cultures. We're all at home right now. We're not interacting as much as we used to in person. So let's continue to learn about each other and have a cultural exchange over social media. We'd love to see it and hear from you. So I'm going to hand this over to Ed, let you take it away. And
can I just say one thing really quickly?
Sure.
This is Marc here. I just want to say, I know Amanda's using a food processor and you guys are all using different tools. I just want a little disclaimer here. I'm going to try to make this recipe as best I can. And I always feel like as a chef, you have to be adaptable. I'm actually on the road in an RV. So I'm in a very small space. I have I have a knife and a cutting board and a couple bowls. So my recipe might be a little different, but I'll share it as I work along with everybody.
Great. Okay, Ed, how about taking it and teaching us kibbeh?
Okay. As you can see that we soaked the bulgur back in the day, back before, and as you can all see that all the water was now absorbed by the bulgur, so we have to put it aside. And then the first thing we have to do is the meat, the first one for the shelling. So the meat, usually we have it like ground beef, 80% or 80% lean, 20% fat. So you have to use food processor. And lucky me, my food processor decided that this is the best day today to stop working. So I had to a little bit to improvise. So I used my blender, which is not ideal, but it served the purpose. So what we have to do is we have to have like 2 cubes of ice. And it's fine if you don't have, but it's like recommended to have it. And we will put it first in the food processor, or in my case, the blender. I would prefer to have like 2 rounds before actually adding the meat, just to break that ice a little bit. I'm gonna do that right away. And then you have to add the meat, the ground beef. So what we are trying to do here is what's called habra, which is some kind of like trying to mix that ground beef into some sort of like a mixture together. So we add all the meat we have based on the recipe I gave you, and we put it like there, and we should run it again on the food processor.
Just to clarify, this is there's going to be 1 pound of meat for the shell of the kibbeh and 1 pound of meat for the filling. So this is right now just 1 pound. It's half of your meat, and you're making the shell, right?
Yes. So this is the shell. We haven't started yet with the filling. We start now with the shell. So this is the pound of meat for the shell. We just trying to have some sort of like the habra, which is more like balanced texture away from the normal texture we see when we buy the ground beef.
Got it. Looking good.
Usually food processor would be ideal, but since mine decided that to take a day off or maybe a year off, buying a new one. So as you can see the texture here, now it's looked like more like a blend in. Yeah, as Amanda I can show you, and as I can see mine. Then what you have to do is to add the bulgur and have the onion also, the onion that we mentioned before. We have also to try to peel it and remove all the outer skin. It should be got easy and fast. So kibbeh in my country, we have 87 documented type of kibbeh. So I'm doing only one, which I got the recipe from my mom. There are many other ways to do the kibbeh. As Lauren told me that there is a meatless kibbeh. I haven't tried it, so I have no idea what it tastes like. And the thing is, kibbeh is very expensive in our country. One of the things that meat is very pricey, and also the nuts. And after we finish the meat and we have the hapra like this, we will put it using the meat grinder in my case and the food processor in Amanda's case and Marc. So what we have to do is we have to add we have the bulgur again here. We will add the hapra and the onion. We put all of them together. And then we have to try to flip them a little bit so they, like with our hands, so they can at least become one mix. And then we can start putting in the meat grinder. Can you switch the camera a little bit?
Sorry, Ed, did you just add the bulgur to that as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the point of the meat grinder is to make the whole 3 ingredients one. So you have the onion, you have the bulgur, and you have the bulgur and the onion and the meat, and you want to have one full texture. The problem with the kibbeh is that it's a lot time consuming and effort consuming. You have a lot of work, and you have to do a lot of noisy pressure. So I don't know if you can see the meat now, you can see the machine now. This is the meat grinder. You can find it from Amazon. There is the manual one, which is a torture, but it's cheap. So you can find it as cheap as like $25. And you can find like a decent mid-sized one with like 35 or 40. It might see it's pricey, but remember, each bowl of kibbeh, you can buy it at any place. It started from like $4 or $5. So if you have some time to do that labor work of the kibbeh, you might end up with way cheaper kibbeh using this machine, and it will be a great and amazing investment. So I'm gonna warn you that it's a lot of noise. I already did that before, so I'm gonna just show you a little bit how it's gonna be like. But beside that, I'm not gonna keep going because otherwise people will turn off the Zoom and no one will ever listen. So one last thing, if you are on like very loud volume, just there's a warning, it's gonna be a lot of noise. So just like stay away from laptop or just keep your headphone out of your ear. So as you can see, the purpose of the meat grinder is to make it more like blend in, so like that. So in this, you have to do that a couple of times. So it's not like only one time, you have to do that like one time or like at least 2 or 3 rounds. So it's like a lot of labor intensive and it requires a lot of time. Amanda will try, what Amanda is trying to do is she's trying to use the food processor. And honestly, to be honest, I never done that. I don't know if it is work or not, and I hope it is working. So
it's working.
really, it's nice. Otherwise, you will end up buying this one. And I think
I have my spices in. The bulgur is a really nice. It's like a really, really nice texture. It's feels like a dough almost at this point. And the onions and the meat are here. So I'm just gonna mix with my hands now. Correct?
yeah, no, you have to use the food processor to mix them together because it's gonna be
one more time. Okay.
one more time. So you have to use all of them together. She added the spice early. You can add a spice in before, or you can add them after the first round. In my case, since I'm using a meat processor. And for those who feel like what should spices they can use, you can use either the one I showed you, and or you can buy this from any grocery supermarket. So this is called like kibbeh spices. So it's essentially everything you need for the kibbeh. I usually use like the normal one, like some salt, some spices, and some pepper or not. It's not that important, but you can buy this one if you want like deeper flavor, if you are really into the spices. So
and that was kind of hard to see, but it's something. The label says actually kibbeh spices, right? So
yeah,
there is something. Yeah. Great.
So
Great.
it is in the spices section, and it has like kibbeh spices in English and also in Arabic. Usually all the Middle Eastern grocery shoppers, there are one in Adams Morgan, there are a couple of Rockville, in Alexandria, Arlington. So most of them, they usually have this, or you can use like the normal one, like the salt and the spices. It's totally up to you.
And also, one of our viewers had a question, and I share this question. So I understand that it's ideal to be using the food processor or a meat grinder. Do you have to use those things? I mean, Marc and Amanda, when you guys were in Zaatari, did you use a food processor or did you just do this by hand? Was there?
When we arrived at our host's home, she already had this masa dough already made. So, but I didn't see any kind of equipment like this at all. You know, electricity was really limited there. Right. So obviously that was all done by hand.
Yeah. So I think for the viewer who asked that question, yes, you know, I think in a perfect world, you have a blender or some mechanism that can really get everything really combined nicely. But I do think you can, I'm fairly certain as well that when we were there, I didn't see any type of equipment like this either. So you can do it by hand. It's just, you know, you just got to put a lot of muscle into it and really get that mixed well, because it does.
As Amanda said, and as you said, Lauren, the end result is those 3 components should be unseparatable. So you should not, when you take one piece of that mixture, you should not tell if it is like a kibbeh, burghul, or habra, or onion. So if you can achieve that by any way, it is fine. Yeah. So food processor, in my case, the grinder. Maybe because like I'm still like in the learning process, I'm not like a professional chef. When my mom said like, okay, you need meat grinder, I went away and I bought it. And as a Middle Eastern and Syrian guy, I eat kibbeh. So it's like, for me, it's like a long-term investment. I had this for 4 years now. So for me, it's like something worth pay for because I eat it. But if you want to just try kibbeh, try to eat that end result by anything you can do. So if you can do it with some muscle, if you can use food processor, if you have one of those like things that can actually mix them together, any kind of tool, that will be fine.
Great.
So
I'm looking good. I'm ready to roll.
Looking good. Marc, how are you?
Are you
doing?
ready to? I'm trying to make a rendition of it right now, and I did get my bulgur to sort of solidify, and I'm not putting, because I don't have a food processor, so I'm actually not putting the meat in it, but I'm taking the juices from the meat that I cooked in the pan and putting in it, so I'm still going to get that flavor. I'm improvising.
Love it.
That's what we do.
So we finished the outer layer. Now we have to turn into the inside layer. So one of the things I put in the recipe that you can use meat, the ground beef, and also you can add nuts. I know that maybe a decent percentage of the American population are allergic to some type of nuts. So the list is open. You can use like pistachio, you can use pine, you can use any kind of the nuts. I put them in the ingredients, or you can use them all. In my case, I decided actually to use them all. So I went to the grocery nearby and I got like one of those containers where they have like a couple of nuts. What you have to do is you try to cut them off, like trying to make them a little bit smaller. It is recommended because when you want to make like when trying to eat, it's better to have like small pieces rather than like big chunk of piece that can stuck in your throat and can make you like, choke or at least like cough a little bit. So we have the nuts here, and we have the additional meat, the second 1 pound of meat that we mentioned, and it is like there. And now all we have to do is we can put it and start fry it on the pan. So we will have that here. Can you turn it?
Magic of TV. I did it already.
Great.
Oh, nice, Amanda. You cheated.
Oh, I really did it. I just did it before.
So actually, it's not Amanda. I already did that also because we are limited by time and people want to see like, what is the end result? Otherwise, they will keep guessing and we don't have second season where we can actually show what's going on. So I already done that. Just like Amanda, we have it is already cooked. We have it fried here. We have the meat and we have the nuts inside.
So you browned the ground beef and you cooked that with, some people are going to use chopped walnuts. I think we used walnuts when we were in Jordan. So you chopped your nuts up in there and you sauteed it all together.
Yes.
Did you season it with anything? Did you put any salt or anything in there?
It's more like as you prefer. For some people, they don't like salt at all. For other people, I have friends who actually don't like to have any salt at all and said like it's bad, it's not good. Some people like to have salt at all. So it's up to you. When you usually eat, how much salt you want. But in my concept, and my mom's usually said, it's better to add salt later by preference choice. When you start eating, it's better to add like salt on the side rather than make it salty for some people and it is unable to be eaten.
So the spices from the recipe are actually in the outer shell, yeah. And then the filling you can season to taste in terms of salt. I know I would imagine Marc and Amanda are salting it up. I would salt it up. I love salt.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So Americans tend to use a little bit of salt, I think, in our food, which some say enhances flavor. I think in some ways, of course.
So people like it, some people they don't like it. For me, when you serve like trying to have like 10 people or 15 people, yeah. You become more about like, do you eat meat or not? Do you eat nuts or not? I try to make it like, with less salt because it's simply, I can put like a saltery and you can simply use it and add as much salt as you need. For me, I love salt, but I don't know how the acceptable amount of how would be for other people.
Right.
Okay. So it didn't work at all.
Yeah.
So I'm going out to everybody out there, and I wanted Ed to maybe talk a little bit more about this because I can't remember exactly the blend, but I use a little bit of Baharat spice along with the cumin and some paprika. And this definitely has some clove or allspice in it, I think.
So we have it in my country. We call it like bahar, which is literally gloves. But here it's better to go to the Middle Eastern shop and go something by 7 spices.
Okay.
So it's called 7 spices. It should be dark brown, very dark brown, and it is the only thing usually used in cooking, not the one that actually you find in the grocery in the normal supermarket. So it is something like that. As she show you, I will show you mine. It should be like this color. It's like as brown as you can see. I label it as like 7 spices, but you can find it. And actually, it's not like a huge. It's not expensive as you can think. It's a little bit like affordable, and you can have it. Any other question?
Yeah, let's start assembling.
So before starting assembling, you have to have the pan and the oil on the heating and start to let them a little bit like get heat. So you can start preparing those balls while this is the oil is being prepared. So we can save a little.
So just so people know, on the stove, they should be pouring their oil into a deep, like a Dutch oven or a pot like you have. Like,
yeah, I don't know if you can see it. It's on. This is like something like this.
Yeah.
I filled it with oil. So the concept of oil, you should have what is enough to cover the bowl you are going to make. So we are trying to make like around the size of a golf ball, more or less. So you have to have an oil that at least cover it. Otherwise, you will be trying to flip it every time to make sure that all parts are equally done or equally. So for me, I prefer to have it like and dip them all and then just wait. And then I have it in one shape and one round of like fully cooked kibbeh.
great.
The meat, we have the kibbeh as we prepared before, and I spare you a lot of noise. What you have to do is to have like a little bit boil of water. The reason for this is when you start working with the kibbeh, your hand is messy. You have a lot of your hands. What the purpose of the water is will make the process of making the balls is much easier and much smoother. I'm gonna make a plate and I'm gonna start making the balls. So as you can see, when you have it with your hands, it is kind of sticky. So it is hard to make. But when you try to dip your hand and try to put some more, it becomes more easier and there is no residue on your hands. So to be honest, I barely make bowls out of kibbeh, but like the process, I try to have like some flat piece. So you have a flat piece of kibbeh. You try to make it flat a little bit, and then put it on the pan of your hand, and then you try to make it the shape like a half bowl. As you can see, can you see me, people? Amanda?
Maybe a little closer.
So I will try to be close. So you have this kind of piece of kibbeh. You have it in your hand. Your hand is already with some water to make it easy to maneuver. You put it on your palm. You press it to make it like a flat piece like this. And then you try to, I need some water because I already tried that.
Amanda, lovely. You're doing a great job with yours.
Try to make it like a half bowl with your hand, like this. And then you start putting the stuffing in it. Try to not overload it, otherwise it's gonna pop out and it's gonna make a lot of problems. So try to put some nuts and some meat. So as you can see, I put something in it, and then you can start wrapping it up. And if you felt like it's not close enough, you can add some kibbeh, more outer shell to make it like bowl.
So you're pinching the seams together, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then you round it up with your hand.
Ah.
Yeah. Now you have to round up your hand. And don't forget to add more water to your hand because otherwise it's going to be sticky. You have always to make your hands wet so it can be much easier and smoother. So I put some water again. As you can see, it's round. Yeah. Mark, how are you doing? What is
Okay. Let me just explain what's going on over here because I have a different situation. What I'm making is I'm not going to make the balls. I'm making a large pancake, but I'm doing the exact same thing. I've got myself some cumin, some smoked paprika in my bulgur with my onions. I did not put any meat on the outside. I know this is a completely different situation. And the meat on the inside, and I'm almost making like a large pancake, and I'm going to flip it because I didn't have the machine to do that grinding and getting it all cold and get that paste the right way. So I'm improvising, and I got to tell you, it's going to be. What did you say? There was 87 versions of it, and
Yes.
now there's 88 versions.
No, actually, you are making one of called. We have a kibbeh in a plate. Like what I mean is, you have like a glass plate like this. You put the first layer of kibbeh, outer kibbeh material. Then you put in the middle the stuffing, which is the meat and the nuts. And then you have another round of kibbeh, and then you put like a little bit with the knife. Some cuts in that, and then you put it in the oven, and this way you have another type of kibbeh.
Well, this is exactly what I was thinking, and I put pine nuts in mine, and I toasted them.
I think you have some version of you like 7 years ago when this was created, and he was like, I'm not gonna do it with oil. Let me do it with this, and this is where the other kibbeh was born.
It's the Murphy kibbeh.
So
it's the Irish kibbeh.
I'm gonna put only a third one, and then. I'm gonna show you how to fry it. I'm still waiting for the oil to be a little bit hot.
I have a question, Ed. My oil's hot. Are we gonna fry them in circular shape, or are we gonna make them like a football?
I was gonna ask that too. In Jordan, when they made them, they were football shaped, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I made them every day.
You did.
So you can do it any shape you want. The idea is how good they are and how tasteful they are. So for me, I can paint it like balls. The other one, they can make it like a football shape. It's not really a huge difference in terms of like the quality or the food itself. It's just the preference.
So we're gonna make 3.
Amanda, can you show us the football? Can you show us the way you guys did it?
I mean,
I don't think the water
I wasn't all that good at the football. Marc was really the pro. Like really, once you after you have the ball, you just kind of make that diamond shape, and use your hands to extend the ends and make it.
Yeah, you can make it any shape you want. So if you prefer like have it like football shape, you can do it like this. Some people make it like very long, more like a tube long. But for us, I'm usually do the basic because as I said, like I'm just a guy trying to have his home country food in his apartment. So I try not to go and stretch myself out. Otherwise, maybe in the next like few years, when I master this one as in current version, I can go to the pro level. But when people say you are good, you should open restaurants, you are great. It was like, it's basic. I'm not even compared to any decent woman in my country. I'm just a guy trying to make food.
I think your mom would be very proud of you today. You are doing amazing. And we're so grateful to her for sharing her recipe with us. She's
proud. I think she's crying whenever I make like this kind of event for my friend. She's crying. She's like, when did you learn to cook? I was like, out of necessity.
I'm gonna lower mine in on a spoon into the.
Let's see that.
Okay, I'm gonna try to put only one.
Beautiful. Amanda, you are like a professional, the best student out there. Hold on, let me really get a good look.
Oh, it's too late to put the oil now.
Oh, look at you. Wait, you have a thermometer for your oil as well?
Of course.
See, this is
teacher's pet. Teacher's pet.
I don't have that. She has like she can tell what is the heat of the oil. I have to look by myself. So for her, it looks good. I have to wait a little bit until my oil becomes.
I assume that somebody might ask. I mean, I'm hovering around the 350 mark here.
How can you test to know if your oil's hot enough if you don't have a thermometer?
So what I have done is I put one in this scoop, and then I dipped it down. And when you start like seeing bubbling, as if you are trying to fry fries, you can tell if it is ready. If it is not, you can simply lift it out. So when I put it down with this, I start seeing that there was bubbling. It's the same when you put the fries. This way I left it. Otherwise, I would simply lift it up and then try another 5 or like another 1 minute or so.
Amanda, do you have a tip?
Well, I took some of this finished, of the finished kibbeh shell before, and I dropped it into the oil, and it became like crispy and golden and brown, and that's when I knew my oil was ready. But I also did that so I could taste it, because I wanted to know if it needed any more seasoning.
So this is another one. I put it here in that spoon, and then I just dipped it slowly. And when I start seeing that it is bubbling, which means that it starts frying, I left it there, and then I removed the. So I have 3. I'm gonna use only 3.
Mark, I wish you were here with me. I can't make kibbeh without you.
So I made.
I know.
It's
It's strange, right?
It's weird. This is, you know, and also just talking about our experiences in the kitchen. You know, we did not cook anything alone. We were usually in the kitchen with 6 to 8 people at a time. Nobody was cooking alone. That wasn't a thing. We were all cooking together. Everybody had a job. We were making multiple dishes. And there was such, you know, we would look over and see, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you making?
Yeah. But all I know is I know you can't smell it through the camera, but this smells amazing. I love those spices coming through.
One of our viewers wanted me to ask, what do you do with the leftover oil? Like, how do you dispose of it? Is there anything you do? What do you do with that oil when you're done with it?
Well, I'm going to make donuts later.
Yeah, you can use it for donuts, waffle, fries. You can use it multiple times. You don't have to throw it. At least I don't do that.
I will give you guys a little bit of my tip. Hold on.
I'm gonna go outside and flip this.
What I do, and I rarely fry at home, because now the whole apartment smells like oil. And probably all of my neighbors in my building are wondering what I'm making. But what I do after I'm done with the oil, I cool it down completely. I use a little strainer and strain out any of the, you know, bits that may have come off, and I'll put it back in the oil container. And I'll just label it, you know, like fried once or whatever, or fried kibbeh in here. And then I just keep it if I'm gonna do it again. And if I'm gonna dispose of it, I'll put this in the freezer so it gets solidified, and then I'll throw it in the garbage. So I usually keep it for a couple of fries.
So we're gonna take some Q&A questions from the viewers. You guys can keep cooking.
Kibbeh?
Because I know you've got.
So it should be like very dark brown. Now you can tell because when you put it, it was more like light brown. So you have to make sure that it's really dark brown and start to be like, you know, tough and crunchy. So now I'm still waiting.
Am I there? That way, look at mine. I think I need to go a little darker now.
I think you need to do a little bit darker, yeah. And you can tell, like, if you like touch it a little bit, you feel like it start to crack, it means that it's fully cooked. If it is start like, you know, to feel like it's still like soft, it means that it's not.
Okay, perfect. Good to know.
So we are now, we can have questions until we finish the frying.
I'm eating mine already. I like the crispy parts.
The Murphy kibbeh.
Okay, so I'll ask you guys just a few questions while you're cooking, but feel free to like shout out when you think your kibbeh is done, so our viewers who are cooking don't wind up with burnt kibbeh because they won't know when to take it out.
Mine's crispy and dark. See, like that?
Mine's still
But if you look at my final product, not to be too bad, but I think I would be chopped.
I'd chop you. I'd chop you.
This is one of the things that you need actually, like why you have to use proper tools. That's because I can't improvise. I'm not that good to improvise. I'm still like in the learning process. I never call myself a chef. I'm barely someone trying to make food for himself. So this is why I'm trying to buy the machine or to the everything as it says in the book, because I can't guarantee any other results if I use different kind of thing.
Well, in your defense, Ed, when we travel, we learn from home cooks, right? Like you're who we want to learn from. We love, you know, working with professional chefs, but home chefs like you are the ones who can really, like, learning your mother's recipe is teaching us something that we wouldn't have an opportunity to learn. And it's,
yeah.
it's authentic, and we, you know, it's
I reflect on that because I encourage anybody like Ed or anybody who has family recipes. I know how hard it is because you have to look over the shoulder of your grandma, your grandpa, whoever makes that recipe, and it's a pinch here, and it's, you know, they'll take a measuring cup that's not really a measuring cup, but it's so important to write that down, practice it just like they would, because that recipe won't live on unless you keep making it, you know. And I think that's so important. So much of what we saw when we traveled were family recipes, and you know, we were scrambling to take notes and write it down, and I took a lot of pictures, but really, you know, if you have a family member that has that recipe, it's so important to cook with them and be in the kitchen with them.
And I want to confirm again that even I'm cooking this and people love it, but I cannot compare myself even remotely with any mom in any Syrian house, no matter when, even in the camps, with their, like, you know, half of their like kitchen items are missing, and yet they are creating magic. So for me, I'm just a person trying to eat. I'm not even remotely a chef. Oh, this looked delicious.
Thank you.
The end result, I'm trying to show my end result. I'm still waiting for that. But it's the same color as this color.
Amanda, sort of building on what you were just saying, we have a question. How can food keep bringing us together when we can't gather because of the pandemic restrictions? Do you think virtual culinary diplomacy like this event is a viable option?
I want to answer that so badly. Please let me answer that.
Okay,
yes.
Amanda.
Yes. You know, FaceTime, Zoom, Google Meet, whatever it may be, you can cook together. This is what I've actually been doing since March. I have been cooking with so many people on these platforms, and I've influenced them, and I've taught them how to cook virtually. They post the pictures of what they made, and then I get to see it as if I was there with them. And it's so exciting. It's so exciting to me to be able to do that from here to wherever they are, and we're still cooking together. We literally are still cooking together. We then are in our separate homes, but we eat the same thing, and then, you know, they'll share a picture with me, and I really feel like that's even more important to try and connect. You know, even if it's through a screen, you can still cook together.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
One of the things about this global crisis that it makes us all in the same boat. So when we are having this experience, the chef is cooking from his house, I'm cooking from my house, and all the participants are doing the same. This is also unite us because we are in the same together. It's not like I'm here because I'm punished, or I'm here because I can't afford going out, or because like it's far away from me. No, I'm doing it at home, this at home with the same method and the same thing that Amanda and the other one are doing. And I think one of the things that distinguished me today is I'm as bad as any other people. Like, I'm not like a professional. So this is your end result. The same way I'm having that here. I'm not make it like a perfect end result, like a professional chef and professional TV show will feel like it's never going to be like this. It will be as good or bad as this.
Amanda, how is it?
It is so damn delicious. Need this spice mix that the flavor is just bringing me right back to being in Jordan. It's such a nostalgic flavor from that trip. And the texture of the bulgur shell on the outside is incredible. And I just love the way this tastes.
So one of the things you can eat next to it, so there are two things. You can make salad, the Syrian salad, which like tomato, lettuce, cucumber, pepper, and with like a dressing, with like lemon juice and some like normal dressing. The other one is you can make something called Iran, which is yogurt, water, and some salt, and you put them together and you try to stir them roughly until you have the texture you want. You might have so a little bit yogurt and more water, or the opposite. But this is usually we eat that because kibbeh is very dry. So we try to break it with something either like liquid as yogurt, as Iran, or as even plain yogurt, or something like a little bit like soft as salad. I think mine is about, they start floating, which means they are about to be ready.
I mean, personally, I don't find anything dry about this at all because, you know, the meat and the filling gives it some fat. and then the oil permeates, and then the delicious filling of the beef is so good. I mean, I have a yogurt here that I'm dipping into, but honestly, I could eat these without that.
And one of the signs that you know that they are done and they are ready, almost ready, is that when they start floating. When you pour them in the beginning, they drown until the plane of the pot, and they start floating up. And then when you know that they are about to be done, now they are start floating. So now I'm ready. I'm preparing myself to see how did I do.
And, you know, I think one of the silver linings of the situation that everybody is finding themselves in is when we're starting to engage more virtually, that gives us a farther reach, right? So, you know, we can learn cooking from people in Jordan on our computers now, and we can have these interactive experiences. And so I think particularly for culinary diplomacy, this is something that actually can allow us to continue engaging and learning and connecting. Even though we're physically separated, we can still learn about each other, and certainly in this context and using this medium.
Absolutely. You know, during the lockdown, I actually did with Inas, who was the chef in Jordan, who we were with, and she did a recipe with me on an Instagram Live, and I got some great feedback from that. People learning from a chef in Jordan was a wonderful thing. By the way, I want to say that mine came out very crispy. It's not the most beautiful thing. I'm not going to let you see it, but it's okay. It's tasty, and I got to tell you, the spices bring you right back.
Right? Oh my God.
And I got mine, and I'm gonna try to see how good or bad they are.
Oh, beautiful!
They look great.
Look at you.
They're perfect.
Well, good.
Wow.
To be honest.
Delicious.
We have a question from a Penn student who actually wrote a senior thesis on culinary diplomacy and soft power.
Wow.
Yes, we're hired. You're hired.
Aren't I supposed to be saying that?
Oh, right. Sorry. You should really hire this guy or girl.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a male or a female, but the question is, what role do chefs, especially those involved in culinary diplomacy, have in advocating for climate action and sustainable food practices? So, you know, when you're, I guess, traveling and you're engaging about food culture, do you ever
Get out of the way.
advocate on behalf of like sustainability and our food culture here in the US are what we're doing here?
I mean, I'd be happy to quickly answer that. I mean, I know Marc and I are advocates for supporting local farms, you know, sustainability, and, you know, not even going 100 miles to get the food that you need, right? So changing that carbon footprint. We have so many great farmers in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut. We don't have to go outside of that. And I find, and Marc can relate to this too, when you travel, especially in Italy, if you study the cuisines of Italy through regions, it all has to do with what's grown there. You know, so they just use what's in their backyard. They're not flying berries in from Chile in the middle of the winter. They're not getting product that they have to have shipped in. You know, they're just using what they have. And I think that's the biggest part of when we travel, what we see is what's growing there. What do they have access to? And that's exactly what influences the food. So I think naturally, a lot of these cultures that we learn from and we learn from their food, they're already doing that. They're already practicing sustainability.
Right. I mean, the question also is asking sort of what role do chefs play in this conversation? And chefs are a huge part of our food system, right? I mean, you guys are really in the center of it. So you have your sort of finger on the pulse of how our agriculture, like what we're doing, what the role is of sustainability and in our food system.
But it ends with us. And I think we all learned this from pandemic, that it starts with the farmer. And then there's the truck and the delivery person and the boxes and the person who makes the boxes and the plateware that goes on the table. I mean, everything is a trickle down. It actually ends with us. It ends on the table. So the chain of how it gets to us is so important.
I thought it was interesting, you know, when this whole thing started, how many people started buying seeds and growing their own gardens.
Yes.
And then I started researching a little bit. And if you think about it, you know, back when World War I or World War II, there were these things called victory gardens. And so even in front of post offices, you were supposed to plant food and be, you know, be part of the solution, because if you grow your own food, you don't have to go to the store and buy it. And also, yes, as Amanda said, you're eating strawberries when you're supposed to be eating them, and you're eating asparagus when you're supposed to be eating them, not, all the time.
Right. I walked down Park Avenue the other day, and in a flower box on a windowsill, there was a vine of cherry tomatoes growing. And I was fascinated. I think the seeds must have just landed there. Nobody's eating them or picking them, but it was amazing to me to see that. And I think I would love to see more of that.
Yeah.
Ed, I think people are curious also about what other kinds of kibbeh there is. Like what other, I believe that kibbeh sort of differs depending on what country you're in. I mean, I think everyone sort of has their own take on it. But people are interested if you know of like what other kinds of kibbeh are there?
So I think based on my experience and the types of kibbeh I ate during my life with my mom, I think the outer shell is mostly the same ingredients. You have to do it the same, burghul, habra, and onion, and mix them together and make it with the grinder machine. The shape, how you can present that is different. There is like this one, like bowl, the other one's like a plate where you have a layer of kibbeh, a layer of meat and the nuts, and another layer of the kibbeh out shell, and then you have to cut it, and then you put it in the oven, and then you have it from the oven. So it's more like, let's say, healthier. There is another one where you put inside that some sort of type of fat, like very heavy fat. So it's like very, very heavy. Like I usually eat one and that's it, because like it's the amount of like fat and amount of stuffing in it is very heavy. Some of them is like, the shape of UFO. It's like very, very plate, like a plate of like, those kind of frisbees. You make it like
That's what Marcs look like. Unidentifiable flying kibbeh.
Exactly, the flying kibbeh.
Exactly, UF kibbeh. The other ones is more like a tube, kind of tube. And also you can play a little bit with the stuffing. You can add less meat or less other stuff. So it's kind of like, the variation. So the concept of kibbeh is the same, but you can do the variation. And as I learned like 2 days ago from Lauren, that there is actually a version where is mostly barely meat, which is like meatless kibbeh, which is like surprised me. And it caused me a lot of like questions. I was like, how they can able to do it, but it was really surprising and inspiring.
Well, you can use also ground lamb. You can use other kinds of ground meat, right? And you can use different spices. I'm sure that's also a factor.
So I'm gonna say my family were not like wealthy enough. So kibbeh was like a guest every few months. So you can even try to use like ground beef turkey if you ever tried that. So turkey is like more cheaper than ground beef in my country. So to put that in perspective, imagine your salary is like $3,000 per month and the pound of meat is like $300. So you would think twice before like making anything would require meat a lot. So kibbeh is something you do unless you are wealthy, or you do it like twice a year because like you want to like, okay, let's break the budget. But it's like 10%, the pound of meat is 10% or like 5% of your income, the average income of the country. So this is why people try to improvise, reduce the amount of kibbeh, the amount of meat, or try to make it meatless, because you deserve to eat it and you want to eat it. It's part of your culture, but sometimes the financial barriers can stand between you and this meal. So you try to overcome that by being creative. And you can use like turkey ground beef, which is like maybe like half of 20% the price of the beef, ground beef. So the ground turkey also can serve the purpose. We tried it with my family a couple of times. We were not able to afford the beef one. Other people tried to do the meatless. So it's always like your end goal. You try to enjoy the kibbeh. You want to try to achieve as much as possible. So you start, try and error, replacing one thing with another, trying to do around, like turn around here or there. Eventually, it's the experience. Even if it is bad, you will start laughing. You'll be like, remember the time when you used this ingredient and it was so horrible that we all like, choked and couldn't eat it? It become like also tradition. It's not like always a good result will be memorable. It's also sometimes the bad ones where you can start looking back and laugh. Oh yeah, I used turkey.
That's how we learn. That's how we learn in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm gonna have to clean up my kitchen and turn it over for another cooking demonstration that I have coming up. I
So
just want to
hopefully, yeah, so hopefully everybody's kibbeh turned out well and not a terrible version. We hope everybody enjoys their kibbeh. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. Don't forget, cook a dish that represents your culture, post it, tag us at Culinary Diplomacy Project on Instagram, use the hashtag PWHCooks. Thank you to everyone. I know Mike is back on. He is going to close us out, but I want to say a special thank you to Ed, Amanda, and Marc. I know, Marc, you're on the road, so I appreciate all of your efforts too. And Mike, thank you so much, and I'll let you close it out, Mike.
That was incredible. I mean, I'm so glad we could host this. As someone that had the privilege of being able to participate in a culinary diplomacy event in Brussels in 2019, in what I would call the before time, before COVID, and as a huge fan of Chopped, I don't think I've ever enjoyed a Perry Worldhouse event more. Thank you so much, Amanda, Ed, Marc, Lauren, and the whole Culinary Diplomacy Project, the pen person you're about to hire for this amazing event. Let's keep using food to stay connected. Post a picture of a dish you made that represents your own culture. Tell us a bit about it using the hashtag PWHCooks, and there'll be 2 winners selected, and each will get a signed cookbook, and from like a real person, not like me. And links to register for all of our future events, including our upcoming colloquia on the UN at 75, coronavirus and competition, are in the chat. And you can learn more by going to the Perry Worldhouse YouTube channel, where you can see all of our events. If you want to get more information, sign up for our mailing list and follow us on social media for up-to-date information at Perry Worldhouse. We'll drop link to those. We will drop links to those in the chat as well. And I hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks. Thank
thank
you.
you, everybody. Stay
Bye,
well.
everybody.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks.